It's a whiskey that needs no introduction and my first time ever owning a bottle. So let's dive into Eagle Rare. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So again, you don't probably need much of an introduction to this bottle. It is Eagle Rare 10-year-old. What a legendary bottle, and I'm so happy to have this on the shelves and so happy to be able to review it for you guys. So just a little bit of backstory in case you aren't as familiar with Eagle Rare and Buffalo Trace, the distillery this comes from. This is one of the more well sought after bourbons in the world. Buffalo Trace products in general are incredibly sought after, in high demand, and therefore pretty hard to find. What we're looking at here with Eagle Rare is a 10-year-old product, like I said, that is thought to be from mash bill number 1 at Buffalo Trace. So they have, I believe, 2 dominant mash bills. This is number 1, which also has Buffalo Trace. I think it's Stag Jr., maybe E.H. Taylor is in that as well. This is thought to be the low rye mash bill. So less than 10% rye is what most websites will tell you about what's in mash bill number 1. I believe it used to be labeled as a single barrel back when Buffalo Trace was hand bottling this product. It's essentially still a single barrel. They had to switch off of that because they went to an automated bottling line, and that sometimes at the very end of a barrel, when they're switching to the next barrel, you might get a little bit of mixture in one bottle out of the whole set. But for all intents and purposes, this is still pretty much a single barrel product, which is really, really cool. And then price-wise, we're looking at something that, in theory, following MSRP, is supposed to be $35 to $40, which is an incredible price these days for a 10-year-old bourbon. In reality, because Buffalo Trace is so well sought after, it's going to be really hard to find, and more than likely you might see it for $50 to $60, and sometimes upwards of that. I've seen certain people saying that they've seen it for $100 plus, which is a little bit disappointing, but that's kind of the story with Buffalo Trace overall. And last but not least, this is a 90 proof whiskey, so by all accounts, a very low rye, easy sipper with a great age statement. So the question that remains, as it does with all Buffalo Trace products, is it really worth the hype and sort of all the expectations and hope people place on this bottle and all the crazy, drive and demand behind it? Only thing we can do now is dive into the whiskey to find out. Just before we do that, I do want to say thanks so much for all the support of the channel. Looking forward to 2023 with some great reviews. So happy to be starting off this year with a review of Eagle Rare early in the year here. If you haven't subscribed already, would appreciate you hitting that big red button and joining the community. And while you're at it, hit that like button too. All right, Eagle Rare on the nose. Let's dive in. I'm super excited. Okay. Good vanilla. That's the first thing I notice. There's a grape cherry note that I get on almost all Buffalo Trace, especially mash bill 1. I do feel like the cherry is just a touch medicinal here, so which isn't totally my favorite, but it's not overwhelming. There's a good amount of oak. A considerable amount of oak, actually. For something that's light, 90 proof, it's not a super powerful nose, but what it's giving me is a nice oakiness. Yeah, and maybe a touch of tobacco, so like some good aged notes really working in there with the sweetness. But overall, a pretty light, approachable nose with some really nice depth to it. That's all good stuff. Let's see how it tastes on the palate and dive in for our first sip here. Cheers, everybody. All right, that is really good. Lots of good cherry and grape. Those are the sweet fruits with some vanilla and some honey. Really nice honey sweetness to this, actually, that wraps around that cherry and that grape. So very kind of like fruit juice, fruity sweetness that I get with the vanilla and honey. And then there are actually a heck of a lot of barrel characteristics that especially kick in the mid palate for me. There's actually a good amount of like barrel spice and woodiness, oakiness, and then again, a touch of that like tobacco, and maybe even the slightest bit of leather as it transitions to the back end. I do think as a 90 proofer, it does a good job of warming the palate, but it's not super creamy and it's not super enveloping, and the finish feels a little bit quick because of that. We're gonna keep diving in though. Let's see if we can pick out some more flavors, and we will get to that finish and really evaluate that. But for now, second sip to pick out some more flavors. Cheers, everybody. Yeah. So on that second sip, I feel like some of that fruit sweetness got toned down a little bit. It's still there, but a lot more of this like caramel, even a butterscotch sweetness, so something more in that brown sugar family really came through. Still got that oak and tobacco and more of the barrel characteristics. So I think sometimes I have this thought, you know, when it's 90 proof, I'm not expecting that combo to be with such good age, and so I'm expecting maybe a little bit more graininess or whatever. But with the 10 years here, those barrel characteristics really kick in the mid palate, which is really nice. Now, the question here really is this finish too. Let's go in and evaluate that and see how long that lingers and what flavors we're picking up. Cheers. Okay. Yeah, that's it for me. A lot of the elements stayed the same. Good consistency. A little bit more spice. Kind of bloomed on the mid palate and stayed with me into the finish. It's not super black peppery, but it might be more like a soft, sweet, simmering cinnamon kind of spice to it that's lingering, which I find really nice. I do think if I had to pick the weakest link in this is the finish for me. Just as a 90 proofer, it doesn't have as much flavor punch on the back end as I would like, but I think those age characteristics give it such a well-roundedness, and it certainly lives up to its reputation as a flavorful, easy sipper. All right, everybody. I think that's a good run through here for a first review of Eagle Rare. It's got your classic quintessential Buffalo Trace flavors. It's really well rounded. The 90 proof makes it super approachable, but the age gives it enough barrel characteristics to be still interesting. It's not the most complex whiskey, it's not the most powerful whiskey, and it's not designed to be. I do wish the finish was just a little bit more punchy, but hey, it's got a reputation as an easy sipper, and I think it totally lives up to that. And if there's any kind of whiskey that I just want to be able to pour a nice glass of, sit down, really enjoy, and just kind of have not punch me in the face, this is at the top of that list in terms of great flavor, very sweet, and super approachable. If this was way more available, it would be the perfect introduction to aged whiskey for a lot of beginner bourbon drinkers. So it's a shame that it's not more available and not more people can be introduced to just the well-roundedness bourbon can have when it's this old. So that's a bit of a shame, but overall, really nice bottle. I would, of course, recommend it if you're able to get it for anywhere. I think under 60 bucks is a worthy price for this bottle. Above that, I might hesitate a little bit. If it's your first bottle, go for it. But once you have a bottle and taste it, evaluate for yourself, obviously, where you think it falls in terms of pricing. But I'd happily pay like 60 bucks to have a backup bottle just because it is a more special bottle, more rare, and, as it says in the name, Eagle Rare, it's just something that, is kind of special to have and really great to share as well. So that's a wrap here on Eagle Rare. Let me know what your thoughts are on this bottle. This is one I'm particularly interested in hearing what you guys think, where you evaluate this price-wise, what your experience has been like. I'm sure some of you have been drinking this for quite a long time, and I'm sure some of you are still looking to get it. So just want to start a conversation around a bottle that has a lot of hype and a lot to talk about. So until I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.